Hello and welcome everybody to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian and today we are breaking down the top 4 from the third Mox Masters Tournament. For those who don't know Mox Masters, they are the collaboration between Eminence Gaming and Playing with Power. Playing with Power obviously being one of the largest names in cEDH, if not the largest, and Eminence Events being the largest cEDH tournament group that we have at the current moment. So these two powerhouses combined to create these online tournaments called Mox Masters. This is the third Mox Masters event, and it's been pretty cool to see what happened at the top 16 and top 4 of this tournament. For those who've been watching the channel for a long time, they might know that I won the first Mox Masters and top 4'd the last one. I actually did not play in this most recent tournament because, unfortunately, there was some construction going on in my house, literally in the room next to where I would be playing, and I kind of realized last minute that it was even more intense in scale than I had realized, and there was literally no way that I would be able to be a cohesive member of the tournament and be respectful to my opponents while also, literally having my walls being torn down next to me. So it was rather unfortunate that I didn't get to participate, but you may see this image right here of me actually helping out on the Scrybaby set, so that's what I did with my weekend instead. But enough about me. Let's talk about the top 16 and then top 4 of this tournament. This tournament has a lot of things that I'm really excited about. First of all, a deck that I didn't expect to win the whole thing, taking the whole thing down, some repeated top 4s, and another huge thing being that 2 of the top 16 in this tournament were people that I have done coaching sessions with in the last month. So one of them literally being the one that I had coached the week beforehand, and the other one being a couple weeks before that. But it feels pretty huge to have, 2 of the people I just recently coached make the top 16 of this tournament, and I'm so excited to talk about these decks, excited to talk about the metagame that's appearing in this tournament, and go from there. First of all, you can go over to the bracket page on eminence.events, the Eminence website, and it will show you the bracket of every single round of this tournament, where people were when they ended the Swiss and whatnot. But I've taken the semifinals here, and this is our top 16 for this tournament, and there's a lot of cool stuff worth mentioning. First of all, we had to mention Thras Oracle being one of the people I did the coaching with recently, playing this Tymna Thrasios mid-range deck. It's sort of a combination of like the Kinnan plus Basalt Monolith going infinite with those infinite mana combos, Devoted Druid plus Swift reconfiguration going infinite mana there. Plus you also get to play Tymna Thrasios. You get to play your Thassa's Oracle, and you get to play your Demonic Consultation, you get to play Tainted Pact, and obviously win the game in that classic way. It's also this Seedborn Muse Thrasios mid-range deck, and it has just a lot of the best cards in Sans Red, and allows you to just gain a bunch of advantage, have these easy infinite mana combos that kind of pop off out of nowhere, and the rest of the deck is a lot of interesting hate bears. So huge shout out to Thras Oracle. It was super cool to seeing, once again, someone I coached, and someone I've known for years now at this point, being able to hit this top 16. The other top 16 list was by another person I had coached recently, going by Sulong Carrot on Discord, and they were playing Jetmir, which is obviously a list I've top 16 at a recent Chaos event with, and a deck that I love and play a good amount, and just a super aggressive version of Jetmir. Compared to my list, there's a lot more low to the ground pieces. So you have things like Dryad Militant, but you start to notice it with things like Grenzo Havoc Razor, Sardian Avenger, Champion of Lamholt, which is a card I'm really interested in this archetype, really just allowing you to push a bunch of damage onto your opponents. We talked about a number of cards when we had our coaching session, including putting Slicer into the deck because it's just a major damage output in these colors. So basically the difference between our two archetypes is that this list is just like way more aggressive than the list I'm currently running. But apart from that, it's a lot of the same stuff that I've been playing in Jetmir, and it was really cool to work on this deck and talk to Sulong about like all of these really cool pieces, and to see this Jetmir deck take another top 16 down. Really cool to see Jetmir seeing play, and it's nice to not be the only one playing it right now. We do have one copy of Blue Farm played by Helenium, who many people will recognize as like a very avid Krark pilot, the creator of the Dami Mommy Tymna Jessica list on the database right now, and just like a known pilot around the community, someone who I'm a big fan of as a human being, playing this Blue Farm list in the top 16. Nothing like too insane here, just wanted to point out that we had another Blue Farm deck hit the top 16 and by a pilot who's not known for this specific archetype, but known for being a good player. We also have 4 different Thrasios Bruce decks in the top 16. 4 different ones. Now it's tough because none of them actually made the top 4, but the fact that there are 4 different ones is kind of insane. So this one, the Chonky Donkeys list, which is hilarious, is very similar to Dawnbreaker Thrasios. They're playing the Freed for the Real combos instead of, just relying on Swift reconfigurations or to all of those things. That is one version of this archetype. There's also 2 other versions that are quite similar. They go under the Advantage Thrasios names. I don't know how I feel about the fact that Advantage Thrasios is is what's used to describe this archetype when it's a single card off of the Dawnmaker list, but it's fine. Maybe not a single card, like 1 or 2 cards, but the idea is basically it's very similar to Dawnmaker with a few, specific choice pieces, things like playing Nature's Claim, playing Turn the Earth, Vapor Snag, a few more bounce pieces, traditional counterspell, stuff like that. But in general, it's very similar to Dawnmaker Thrasios. It has Zerda combos, it has Kinnan combos, it has the Vizier of Remedies and Devoted Druid combo, so extremely similar to Dawnmaker and only a few cards off. And this is actually, once again, there are 2 players in this tournament playing this exact same 99, so that was pretty interesting. And then there was a person playing Bruce Thrasios Wild Pile, which is very insane. An archetype that Rebel was known for kind of engineering, which is basically like you play Bruce and Thrasios and then you just play some like really big insane creatures, things like Coma and Hullbreaker Horror and Elesh Norn, and then you kind of like play things. This one's wild because I was playing cards like Crom and Displacerkin and White Plume Adventurer, and it's just like a lot of like just buck wild value creatures. I never really get how archetypes like this close games out, but clearly it's doing something correct. Obviously Thrasios Bruce is a powerful combination in general, but it's playing some really whack cards to get there, and apparently is strong enough to make the top 16. So huge showing from Thrasios and Bruce as a commander combination, putting four different decks in the top 16 after its insane run in Chaos, also putting 3 or 4 archetypes with Thrasios Bruce in the top 16 there. So clearly Thrasios Bruce Tarl is like the top 16 deck at the current moment, which is pretty cool, having being one of the people who's like pioneered this archetype, and it feels pretty good. But yeah, Thrasios Bruce is really shining in the current cEDH metagame. Definitely worth talking about. Another interesting list here, we have Sisay. This is a non-Gigantha version of Sisay. It has the like a bunch of really interesting value planeswalkers here in this list, like just a lot of really cool ones. It's trying to go off with things like Emil Dockside combos. It has some interesting stuff with Sakashima. I would love to hear from the pilot of this list, because I know obviously the easiest combo with Sisay is Emil plus Derevi plus Gaia's Cradle, right, to make infinite mana, and then you make infinite Sisay activations to your whole deck, and then you can recur things like Kroxa and whatnot. But it's definitely interesting to see this list because it's so peculiar. But I would love to hear from the pilot of this archetype to hear the interesting inclusions in this deck, like very specific choices as far as like what's actually being played here. It's like 5-color good stuff plus like a legendary theme deck in a sense, and then just like a bunch of really good cards in the format. Super weird deck, but also like super unique and cool to see it here. Another deck I was not expecting was the Sithis list from this tournament. It did make the top 16 as well, playing 30 separate enchantments, obviously very good with Sithis as a commander, playing also a bunch of the different stacks creatures, stuff like that to slow your opponents down. And then I think the idea is really just to outvalue your opponent's win with a card like Elesh Norn. I didn't really see a ton of like actual factual win cons in here. It seems like a lot of it is just like drawing a bunch of cards, turning your enchantments into advantage, and then just kind of killing your opponents the old-fashioned way. Kind of like what the Jetmir deck is trying to do when you're just actually trying to beat your opponents to death. And then you get to play cards like Null Rod and Collector Oof and like break parity on artifacts and stuff like that, and just outvalue your opponents with enchantments, which is not what I expected to see in this top 16, but it's a pretty spicy list. Moving on to our top 4. We got our mix is mid, but so is the range by Sharky M02. And this is a Crom Tevesh list, and you may be recognizing this list because this list is the exact same top 4 with a couple switches that we'll talk about in a second. But this is the same pilot who took this Crom Tevesh list to the top 4 of Chaos literally a week ago. Very impressive run by this pilot, right? To top 4 2 tournaments in a row, week after week, is so huge. Like, that is such an impressive performance. Yeah, this is like a Crom, Tevesh mid-range deck, right? You're playing your Wheels, your Notion Thief package, you're playing your Pyramid Abyss at Turbo ad Nauseam stuff, and it is definitely a Turbo Naz list that is trying to just win the game by casting your 2 giant mana advantage engines in the command zone, being your Crom and your Tevesh, and you're trying to just win over the top of your opponents. Very interested to see that this list is doing, I guess, technically better than Tymna Crom in the current metagame, seeing as Tymna Crom has more options, more colors. Tevesh is just a very interesting option. Obviously, you have things like Skull Clamp to really gain you a bunch of advantage. You just lose access to white, but clearly Crom Tevesh putting up 2 top 4 results by the same player week after week. Clearly something is going right with this archetype, and it's very, very strong. And I did a comparison to last week's list. So last week's list was running Burgi, Ledger Shredder, and an island, whereas this week's list cut a land, then played Praetor's Grasp, Narset, and Curse Totem, which is interesting interesting. Curse Totem being able to beat up on some of the creature decks, which are usually pretty common in a tournament like Mox Masters. As we saw, there were 4 SEO's Bruce decks, which Curse Totem is a super effective against. And that's just one of the archetypes that we saw an abundant amount of. And then Narset, great when you're playing so many wheels. Praetor's Grasp, it has its, ups and downs. I'm not a huge fan of the card, but also I've seen it overperform for people many, many times. So crazy to see this deck do, once again, 2 top 4s week after week. Very impressive run, and congratulations to our player here, Sharky, for making 2 top 4s in a row. Huge congratulations. Great performance. So better lucky than good by Big Richie. Big Richie is a player I've known for quite some time, and very excited to see them put up a result here. I haven't really seen them top a tournament. I don't know if ever, but with Krark Sakashima, doing the classic Krark Sakashima things, having their Veyruns, having their Krarks, their Harmonic Prodigies. For those who don't know the deck, the idea is to abuse the fact that you can have 2 Krarks in the command zone with Sakashima and just kind of storm off in the face of your opponents and be extremely hard to interact with. And there's not like too many insane choices here that are worth mentioning, but it is a classic Krark Sakashima trying to storm off, trying to win the game, and trying to not let your opponents disrupt your engine, right? It is one of those decks that if you do not disrupt the fact that Krark and Sakashima are going to resolve, if you let both of those creatures resolve, you probably are in a considerably less likely position to actually win the game. You got to remove those creatures before they become a problem, or they suddenly just start storming off and you really can't do much about it because you counter one spell, but they have multiple copies of it and they can just pop off in the face of whatever you do. So Krark Saka consistently putting pressure on your opponents, and now here making top 4 of this tournament. We're whipping through. We have Lisby here, who is a player I have definitely played against, and playing Bloodless Pod. This list is Blood Pod, but they are, once again, without the Blood Moon, right? Hence the name Bloodless Pod. We only have Deafening Silence, Blind Obedience, and Survival. Trying to win with the Birthing Pod combo, or able to use Vivian on the hunt, which is the exact same thing when you have your Tymna. You just uptick and you do the whole Eladar combo. For those who don't know, you get Eladar Guardian, which flickers either your Pod or your Vivian, which allows you to go up to your Karmic Guide, which allows you to bring your Felidar back, which allows you to get Kiki, which allows you to get Karmic Guide, yada, yada, yada. You make infinite creatures with Kiki Jiki and Felidar Guardian, and you win the game. And that's the main win condition of this archetype. You also have access to things like Dockside, and sometimes you have combos with that. Emil plus Dockside doesn't really do anything with your command zone, so I'm very interested to hear the thinking behind this archetype. I guess if you have Mayhem Devil, that is enough of a payoff, but it's not like you can assemble that line with your pod. The rest of the deck is, creatures that allow you to go over the top, like Elesh Norn. You have your cards like Linvala to completely be one-sided stacks pieces against your opponents. You have your opposition agents, your Aven Mind Sensors, you have your Thalias. Vexing Shusher is very good against, like, as we mentioned, all these permission decks that you just saw in the top 16. And you get just like every color but blue and all of the best interaction that isn't stack interaction. You get, cards like these where you get your Thorn of Amethyst, your Null Rod to really shut down your opponent's artifacts, and you get to break parity on those by playing so many dorks and like playing this very creature heavy strategy. And also very interesting to have this Dockside plus Emil combo in a deck playing both Null Rod and Collector Oof, right? Like that is very interesting to be able to shut down all these artifact combos, but also be playing these strategies and also playing Birthing Pod as well. I'm not a huge fan of decks that contradict themselves so much as this one does, but really it was a strong enough archetype to be able to make the top 4 of this tournament. So congratulations to Lisby for making top 4 with this Tymna, Tana, Bloodless Pod list. It's not an archetype I'm used to respecting a lot. So genuinely, like, congratulations for doing that with this archetype, because it's usually one that I'd write off in a lot of pods. To be honest, Blood Pod is not one that I really respect a lot, and the fact that it was able to make the top 4 of this tournament is genuinely very impressive. It's been a lot of people's like pet decks, but not usually the one that takes everything down. So congrats. And this was not what I was expecting. Subjective Reality coming in here and winning Mox Masters 3 with Godo. Now, Godo is a deck that I've always had so much respect for. It's a deck that I've loved. I enjoy playing it. I'm a huge mono red player myself. Like, mono red is, my favorite way to play Magic in general. It's really hard to do that in cEDH, and usually the only way to do it has been decks like Godo, and it's super cool because Godo doesn't really usually put up results, right? And the fact that not only did a Godo deck go far into this tournament, but a Godo deck won a major cEDH tournament. That's huge, right? Like, that is not something that happens a lot, and especially with a known deck like Godo, right? It's not a surprise factor anymore. Like, no one's confused as to what Godo does, but to be able to take this deck and go and completely just steamroll an entire tournament with Godo is so cool. Nothing too crazy here. For those who don't know, you get Godo and you get Helm of the Host, and that is your way to make infinite Godo attackers. And the rest of the deck is sort of just optimized to the point where you want to go, okay, how do I best achieve my Godo combo? How do I get to that 11 mana as quickly as possible? I love that they're now playing cards like Warrior's Oath, and if I'm not crazy, they're also playing Final Fortune. Interesting to see they're playing Warrior's Oath, Final Fortune, but no Last Chance. I guess that's kind of unique. But the idea is just to like jam the Godo thing as fast as possible. It's a creature combo, so it's a little harder to disrupt than something like an early Ad Nauseam. A lot of good Godo pilots just, you know, mulligan to an early turn 1 or 2 Treasonous Ogre and just kind of win the game that way. And you also get to play occasionally some like really solid stacks pieces, things like Grafdigger's Cage or Blood Moon. Now this Godo list is playing Underworld Breach, which is traditionally a card that I've heard you just don't play in Godo. So I'm kind of wondering if there is any sort of combos that I'm unaware of with this version of Godo, or if it's just literally a value Underworld Breach, which is wild because you're also playing Grafdigger's Cage, right? Super cool stuff. Really didn't expect to see Godo here. Godo is just one of those decks that has been around forever and not really like put up insane results, but is always one of those decks that as soon as you start to disrespect it, it wins games. And apparently it got enough disrespect that it was able to take down an entire tournament, which is huge. And I know the ironic part of this being a Playing with Power sponsored tournament, and Ryan from Playing with Power probably losing his mind at the fact that Godo won this entire tournament is so cool. Congrats to Subjective Reality for taking a deck that I think a lot of people just sort of write off and turning it into something real and winning an entire tournament with it. That's so cool that Godo is able to take down this entire tournament. And just as I said, something I would have predicted in any amount of time, that Godo would just like steal this tournament out of nowhere. So congrats, Subjective. And that is our top 4 breakdown. Now, if you like top 4 breakdowns like this, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It lets YouTube know that you enjoy this content. Now, I've been doing the top 16 sort of summary as well as the top 4 breakdown. And if you guys are enjoying that, please make sure to leave comments about that in the comment section down below. I love making these top 4 breakdowns. I was kind of sad I did not get to participate in this Mox Masters, seeing as especially it's been a really successful tournament series for myself personally, but I was able to do some really good work over the weekend, and I'm really excited to participate in the next one, and I'm feeling really motivated, and I'm hoping to be able to put up a solid performance with it. Tell me what you guys think about this tournament. I'm kind of baffled that Thrasios Bruce is just turning into one of the most prolific top 16 decks in the format right now. The fact that 4 of the top 16 in 2 tournaments in a row were this archetype. The fact that Tevesh Krom is now a 2-time top 4 placing deck in 2 weeks with this same pilot is pretty huge. A lot of stuff like that is pretty crazy, and this tournament has a lot of things that I was not expecting. Genuinely would not have been able to predict the results of this tournament had you asked me even days beforehand. So it's really cool stuff here. And if you're enjoying this content even more so than wanting to hit like and subscribe, which are totally free and super easy for you to do, you should check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. In that Patreon, you can do such amazing things like have your names in the show notes at the end of these episodes. You can vote on live brews that we are doing here on this channel that I'm going to be starting up very soon. You can do things like sign up for our coaching tier, which are people who get a guaranteed coaching session every single month. Now, I've had some questions recently as to whether that is an exclusive thing to our patrons. No, if you are interested in cEDH coaching in any degree, from a player like myself who, you know, I had one of the most impressive win records of 2022 and a cEDH career that I'm extremely proud of, and if you're interested in receiving coaching from me, there is my email, comedianmtg@gmail.com. You can check me out on Discord and Twitter. Any of those places, I have open DMs if you want to chat and inquire about a coaching session. I'm happy to talk about it. And thank you once again to our patrons who help support this channel and keep the lights on. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and I appreciate it greatly. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head.